Hey guys, so excited to have you here today. Now, any of you guys that think we're talking about bass, no, we're talking about the other one. We're talking about some bass today. As always, this is Toyd. I'm here with Cameron from DIY Hi-Fi and Ryan from Impulse Audio. How are you guys doing tonight?
Really good. Bass
Really
is the
good.
best part, so I'm excited.
It really is. You know, for a lot of people, bass is that one thing that they chase more than anything else.
Yeah, it seems that way lately. I mean, there was a time when audio was all about the mid-range, but yeah, definitely.
Even the science backs up that the most impressive part for normal people that are studied is the bass response. That's what stands out the most and what ranks as one of the most quality factors for those people that are the uninitiated.
Mhm.
I remember once going to a event. I'm not going to say where. I went to an event and everyone loved how this system sounded. I want you to know it didn't sound very good. Like it was very mediocre, but the bass was pretty impressive, especially for that area. And people were leaving there. They were watching scenes of a movie that the bass was very prominent in. And people left that room being like, wow, that was a really good system. And I'm thinking to myself, you mean their subwoofers were really good?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, and that's all.
yeah. Like the rest of it was, it was okay.
Yeah. I feel like
So to,
with the way home theater has gone over the past 20 years, that's when the emphasis on bass really became prominent.
absolutely. And guys, I want you to know as well, hey, Bobby Burkett's here. Hey, Bobby, it's great to see you. Make sure to let your guys questions, ask them in the comment section. There's been a lot of questions. I actually had one on Facebook that I wanted to talk to you guys about later in the podcast. But right now, we want to talk about all the different ways that you can add bass. And typically, what we're talking about are different alignments. We're going to be talking about sealed boxes. We're going to be talking about ported, passive radiator, and of course, the horn, which is not my specialty. So these guys will do a little bit more on the horn than I will. But the first question I want to ask you
Thanks for
guys
putting it
is
on us.
you're welcome. This is why I'm the host right now. I want to start with this question because I think this encapsulates a lot of the questions that people have. This is a question that was on a Facebook group called DIY Loudspeakers. You guys are welcome to join that group if you want to. It's a free group on Facebook. It says, does it make sense to make speaker boxes like a transmission line, ported, to get your deep bass? Or is it a better idea to take a big driver, put it in a regular sized closed box, and manipulate it with DSP? So basically, use room gain and DSP to your advantage. What are the pros and cons of each of these style setups?
Wow, that's a good question.
Cost is the first one that comes to mind if you're going the DSP route. But it's going to be big consideration. Maybe you already have a lot of that back end equipment. If you're starting out, though, there are other things to consider aside from cost.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't jump to that, but you're right. That's absolutely the first thing that somebody should think about.
The cost. Yeah, and not
Yeah,
just the cost of the material, although the material can cost a lot more because it's ported, but also the cost of time that it takes you to figure out because sealed boxes in general are a lot more forgiving.
I think also, yeah, they are more forgiving, so it's going to take a little more knowledge maybe to get like a transmission line ported, whatever this individual is thinking about. But with the sealed and DSP, which is actually my go-to, you got to remember that you can quickly run out of headroom. The ported box is it's just gonna grant you so much more efficiency, like tremendously. It's free bass. It's amazing the difference. So
And we're talking about efficiency in the low end.
yeah, of course, like around your port tuning. So I mean, if you're like this person, kind of, if they're talking about a transmission line, it kind of sounds like they're talking about their main speakers, not a subwoofer.
Mhm.
So maybe they're tuning that to 40 or 50 hertz. A sealed box, you're going to be 12, 15 dB down at that 50 hertz mark, which is, in terms of power consumption, is tremendous.
Well, it depends on what size. So what we're talking about is doing a large, like a 21-inch subwoofer, 24-inch subwoofer in a sealed box versus a ported. What I came up with, and he's commenting on a video that I did a while ago. And what I came to the conclusion, we're going to talk about this a little bit later when we talk about, especially when we start talking about the horn-loaded subwoofers. But when you start taking a 21-inch and 24-inch subwoofer and you start putting them in a ported box to get down low, the box gets really big really fast. And you can do it. There's nothing wrong with it. But a lot of these 21 and 24-inch subwoofers are now designed to be able to go down to like an F3 in the 30 hertz range. And with that F3 in the 30 hertz range in a sealed box, you can allow a lot of room gain to take over to help get you down in the 20s, even 10 hertz. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have to DSP it, because you're going to have to DSP the other end down, right? The high end down or the low end up, depending on how much excursion you have on those subwoofers. But for me, if you have the right size room and you can put it in a closed room and you can use that room gain to your advantage, then you can do that with some of these higher sensitivity woofers and you save yourself a lot of space. You could put 6 or 8 subs in the same amount of space that it would have taken you to just put one ported.
Yeah. When you first stated the question, I was not thinking 21, 24-inch subwoofers. If you're talking about these large format subwoofers, I am definitely in the sealed camp. Go sealed. I think when you're talking bass like below 80 hertz for, say, a home theater, you should probably, if your budget allows it, you should probably be into DSP anyways. And then when you're talking about big format drivers, put that sucker in a sealed box, let the room gain do its thing, which I've seen countless examples of, like a ground plane measurement, anechoic ground plane, and then in the room, and room gain is a thing. It's incredibly powerful below 30 hertz. That seems to be about the magic frequency from what I've seen. And I wouldn't. That would be a massive ported box. I don't see the advantage there. I think there are reasons for large low tunes, and we can talk about that. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's the same thing that I was going with. Like when we're talking about these large sealed subwoofers, a lot of times what we're talking about too with like a 21 or 24-inch, especially when you put it inside a room, you have so much overhead, like area that you'll never get to, right? Like you'll never touch that area when you're playing a movie or music. It's just not going to get there. And so you have a lot more options such as DSP. Hey, look who it is. I'm sorry. I gotta interrupt to say DIY audio guy, man, I love Justin. And if you guys are not part of Justin's channel or community, you need to get on it. He does some awesome stuff. And of course, we used to do sound advice together, but definitely check him out. Thanks for stopping by, Justin, man. It's cool to see you.
Shout out to Justin. I brushed up like on 20 of his videos before we did this, so I didn't put my foot in my mouth. He's got some of the best bass videos on YouTube. So
he does.
Yeah, he probably does. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You were the one talking.
Oh,
you right in the middle of your thought. You went, Justin.
Thanks.
The end.
Brian, I think it was
Rollerson.
Yeah. Maybe it was him twice, but there's been a couple comments about rotary subs, which I don't think we were going to cover in this. They are a different animal altogether, but they are incredibly efficient. They go incredibly low. They require a tremendous amount of space and investment and knowledge. But they are not something I've even considered tackling.
Can you clarify what a rotary sub is? Because I think a lot of people may not understand that we're not even really talking about like a normal subwoofer in this regards.
Yeah. So I haven't delved deep into it because it's just not something I'm ready to take on. But my understanding of how a rotary sub works is it's basically a fan where the blades, if I'm not mistaken, they oscillate, which is why they can't go very high, because you can't have something going really quickly.
A lot of mechanical noise.
Yeah, it'll probably break. but if you have like a 10 hertz frequency, those blades can go back and forth, and so you're basically sucking air and in and out like this. So 60-inch rotary sub, he says, that would be like a 60-inch diameter fan. Again, Brian, if I'm totally botching this, or either of you two, let me know. But if you have a 60-inch fan that's pushing air back and forth like this, that is very much like a direct drive radiator, like a subwoofer driver, a conventional subwoofer driver, except for you moving just way more air because that fan is pushing and pulling like crazy.
But like you said, it's very limited. It's really for those people that are trying to go the extreme low end. I'm wondering really if rotary fans are even that important anymore, with the option of getting like a 24-inch subwoofer, for example, now that can probably go to single digits pretty easily inside a room. Obviously off the DSP, you might need multiple ones. I don't know. I have no interest in doing a rotary sub either, but they're cool. I like looking at them.
While we're talking, this brings up an interesting subject. So we're talking about infrasonics, so stuff below 20 hertz. What sort of amplification are you guys using if you're wanting to go that low? Because we're talking about bass boosting a lot in those lower frequencies to get the same level, a flat response down to that level. But as you both know, something like a Crown XLS is going to be limited. There's a 12 dB per octave high pass or
30
low pass.
hertz.
30. Yeah.
Hertz.
So yeah.
XLS, XTI is 20.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they're limited in the range that they will dig. They've got the power on tap, but it's only going to take you down so far. So are there any other substitutions you guys are aware of?
Like amplifier substitutions?
Yeah. Yeah. Anything that's going to have enough headroom to deliver at those low frequencies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I'm not up to date on which amplifiers are digging down, but to take a page out of Boso Bass, I don't know if anybody is familiar with his work. He's been kind of out of the scene as far as I know, but basically I agree with him, and I believe that the limitation to low frequency bass now is in the electronics. I mean, like you say, 21-inch, 24-inch sealed subwoofers with room gain, generally they can get down. It's your electronics are preventing that. They all have, even good stuff has a high pass around 3 hertz, it seems, or higher, 10 hertz. And anything in your chain from your AVR, your amplifier, your DSP, all these things adding up cumulatively, we're seeing high passes of 10 hertz. So, and that's on good equipment. So it's not really the driver, it's the amplifier, your AVR, all this stuff.
Yeah.
So this is what really was interesting to me. To a certain degree, every amplifier has to have some type of high pass on it in some way, shape, or form. I was talking to Dylan from Buckeye Amps. I'm sorry, Dylan owns Buckeye Amps. So if you guys are not familiar with Buckeye Amps, he sells 6 channel, 2 channel, 4 channel, mono channel, all amplifiers. And he uses HypeX and Purify amplifiers. And I remember talking to him about his HypeX modules, because one of the things that really surprised me about the HypeX modules that he used is we were able to look at where and the high pass is basically like at the very, very end. And I can't remember if it's at like 5 or 10 hertz, but it would be the one that I would use if I wanted to go crazy low, as long as it could produce the amount of bass that I wanted, as far as like amplifier power output, I should say. And so I asked him, I said, why don't you ever just push these as subwoofer amplifiers? And he was like, I probably should. But that's one that I can think of off the top of my hand, were those HypeX modules he was using. And I believe it was the NCX 500s that he was using. Of course, you could just go back and watch my interview with him. It was me and actually my friend Justin. We did that one together. I think it was actually I think that was a Sound Advice stream. So
yeah, I've been thinking about putting back together those Malai modules and using that as a subwoofer amplifier. 500 watts.
All right.
Or so.
What did you say?
That Nalai amplifier that Hypex sent me, I've been thinking about throwing that thing back together and using that as a subwoofer amp instead of this crown. The crown's more powerful, but I think that Nalai is probably allowed to dig just a little bit deeper, uses those Nalai modules from Hypex.
Yeah, I would try it out and see if you can notice a difference. One of my friends bought one from China that was supposed to not really have a high pass. They had done some testing on AVS for him, and he checked it out, and he didn't really notice any difference. Now, he was using 18-inch sealed, I think, by Stereo Integrity, and he just didn't notice really any major difference. And I think some of that probably has to do with maybe even his boxes that he's got going on, in the essence that it all depends on his room and room gain. And, if we're trying to go that low, there's a lot more that we're looking for that could be introducing issues of why we're not getting there.
Anonymous Advice brings up the tactile transducer. That's
well,
like
before we go there,
okay.
I want to pull up this one that he asked earlier. Thoughts on PSA subwoofers? There's a founder, Tom V. Not really familiar with PSA subwoofers or Tom V. I'm going to be honest with you. He notoriously will not give out sample products for review. That's not uncommon. Stating that measurements don't matter. Audioholics was stonewalled, and Gene said they were afraid. And then he goes on to ask the question. He's asked this on my channel before. What do we think about that? Would we be concerned if we bought a subwoofer from a company that was like, no, I don't want to share any measurements with you, and I also don't want you to measure it? And not necessarily this specific company, but just in general.
Sure. I'd be leery. I'd want to measure it more. That's for sure. That might get me to might get me to do a ground plane measurement.
It would bother me. I mean, I don't have anything against PSA. I haven't really delved into their products any more than just searching their website and a few things. But yeah, I mean, I think measurements matter, and that counts for subwoofers too. What do you have to hide?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's what our whole last video was on, right? Like it was like, the more the measurements, the better. We want more measurements. We don't want just one measurement. We want a bunch of measurements. So yeah, I agree completely. If you're at that point and I don't know what's going on. He might have a legitimate reason why he doesn't want them measured. Some people are just afraid that people can't measure them properly, which I think is definitely a good question. And we gotta go with that. Hey guys, our first super chat in 3 episodes. So yay, Nate Gupta.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Go ahead, Cameron. You go ahead and read it, man.
Speaking of amps, how come we don't see a lot of 3-channel amps for LCRs? Rough crowd, by the way.
I thought everybody was being nice.
Part coming. Why don't we see? Well, I mean,
I'll tell you why, but I want to hear what you say first.
Well, I mean, yeah, so you don't necessarily see them pre-configured because it's an odd pairing, and there's if you're doing a home theater, there's so many other variables. Or is it just an LCR? But I mean, you can go to someone like Emotiva. There are a ton of other companies that I think that Hypex company that I built that amp for allows you to, add different modules. So you could create your own LCR or your own 3-channel amplifier. But I don't know the marketing reason why they're not pre-built, but you can find them for sure.
Yeah.
So
I'm interested to hear you, Nick, because you said
well,
why.
Yeah, I do know why a lot of them don't do 3-channel. A lot of them are using the same amplifier boards, right? They're using stuff from Hypex, they're using stuff from Purify, they're using stuff that's pre-built. A lot of these companies are. And there's nothing wrong with that. But those come already designed as a 2-channel stereo setup. Mm-hmm. Now, the only way that you would create one as a single channel is if you take the chip and you bridge it. And then if you bridge it, well, now you've doubled the amplifier power of one output. And what, for your center channel? Do you want that one doubled? I mean, so there's really, like, you're either losing one output, right? Like by just leaving it off, or on the other hand, what you would end up doing is taking all of them, taking a smaller chip, for example, and making all of those would then, of course, being bridged. So then you'd have 3 chips but all of them would be bridged. So you would end up taking that decision. But I think for a lot of them, being able to buy the chip that can do 500 watts already, and you can just put 2 of them in, and the cost difference is so minimal. Like, why wouldn't you? I mean, sure, maybe you have an extra channel, but
I think Mr. Gupta's probably not asking. He probably is well aware of them, but I mean, I think home theater receivers have so much of that cornered. By the time you get to separates, like I say, if you're going that far, you might be the type of person that wants to configure your own and do, 3-channel, 5-channel, whatever you're doing, and have it made your way. So I think for most everything else, a home theater receiver is going to suffice for most people.
But speaking of that, this is another good point, is that this is not an advertisement for Buckeye amps, by the way. I do like Dylan. I've actually never used a Buckeye amp myself, so I can't personally. I know a lot of people that have, and they really love them. I need to talk to Dylan about getting one for the channel sometime. But if you want yours a little bit differently than what he offers on there, you can ask him to do it, and he is one of those guys that is willing to do that. I know in the past he's been willing to do, like, for example, some people want 500 watts for their front 3, so they want 4 of them to be 500 watts, and then their rears to be at the 252, and he'll mix and match and put them in there for you. So all of those are good. Now, another shout out to Nate Gupta, because Nate created a home theater, and I forgot the name of it. I think it was like THT or something, but it stood for like Toyd's Home Theater, because pretty much everything he put in there were speakers I designed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Is he the guy that built your 212s?
Yep. He built the Audience 212s for the front, the Cinema 10s in the back, and he'd already bought the stuff for the Audience 212. And he goes, man, I kind of wish I would have waited and listened to the Cinema 10s first, because I would have just built all Cinema 10s. He was that impressed with he's like, I would have never even, now he hadn't heard the 212s yet, but he had only built the Cinema 10s. Okay. And then now subwoofers, he went someone else, but I feel like we're like way off topic though. No.
Yeah, but he gave us $5. I mean, we'll talk about him all night.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, super chats always take priority. If you have a super chat that you want to show, we're going to talk about it, but
throw us $2 and we'll dance like a monkey.
I don't know about that one.
Thanks, Nate.
Yes, thank you, Nate. We really do appreciate that.
And Nick, I think you're right. I hadn't considered the boards, but you were right. That is the reason why. I can't see why it wouldn't be.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, well, it doesn't make much sense for them to manufacturing wise. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said, I didn't realize he did Atmos too. So he did 3 Audience for the LCRs, 4 Cinema 10s, and 5 Atmos.
That's crazy.
Now, obviously, we're gonna ask the question: how do you like it? He also did a JVC projector, which is awesome. Like, he's got like the best of everything. So back to subwoofers.
Can I quickly answer a couple questions?
You can answer whatever you want.
John asked for accuracy. Is it smart to power directly under 80 hertz? Yes. Don't. Sounds like he might be thinking passive crossover there or something. With today's electronics, please do that digitally and power your subwoofers directly. Don't put any passive crossover components between your amplifier and your subwoofer. Yeah. And then anonymous advice asks, how many subs do you recommend? 1, 2, 4? Well, the research on this says for the best room smoothing, you want 3. This research comes from JBL. That's the best research I can find on it. More always trends towards better. You get more headroom and you get more room smoothing for free. In fact, if you had 4 or more subwoofers, we're talking spaced around. If they're co-located, this counts as 1. But if they're spaced around, if you have 4 or more, you can almost get away without using any DSP. It's like magic. I don't know if we missed any other quick questions, or if you had anything to add to that.
No, I think that's a really good point to make up. Is there was something going on in Germany, and I cannot remember the exact science behind it, but they would put a bunch of subwoofers in the front, a bunch of subwoofers in the rear, facing each other, and I was like, man, doesn't that phasing, like, if the phasing is off, you're just causing issues. That's what I was thinking. But supposedly it works really good. It's a big thing going on in Germany.
The subwoofers were facing. What do you mean?
Like if this was the front of your room, the subwoofers would be facing this way. If this was the back of the room, they were facing this way toward, and the listeners in the middle.
Like a year or two ago, I saw, maybe it was a podcast, but the engineers that were researching that or working on, maybe if it was a product or software, I can't remember which aspect of it they were working on, but I saw the explanation behind that, and it was over my head. But it was interesting. I forget, I can't remember anything about how it worked, but I've seen what you're talking about, I think.
All right. Well, now it sounds like we have no idea what we're talking about. So let's go on.
Let's talk about box types.
Let's talk about box types. So there's 4 different box types, really. There's sealed, there's ported, and passive radiator. People are going to say, well, that's ported. Yeah, that is. Passive radiator is ported. And hey, Playback Mansion, thank you so much for the $6 super chat. We really do appreciate that. Thanks a lot. And Playback Mansion, if you have a question to go along with that, just put it down below. We'll make sure to answer that too. But thank you so much. We definitely appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And then the 4th would be horn loaded. So
I mean, there is bandpass and a couple others maybe, but
bandpass is a form of ported, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
they
technically passive radiator could be considered a form of ported as well, but
yeah, you got the main ones there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's more, but those are the main 4. So,
and we're not going to talk about no box, open baffle, because we are talking about low frequency here.
You know what? I don't mind, and I don't mind even talking about like infinite baffle or something like that, because technically, infinite baffle is a very large sealed box, right? Technically,
I mean, open baffle.
Yeah, I know what you meant. So, if you want to say that, whatever. All right. Let's first answer Playback Mansion's question. Yep. He said, thank you guys. I'm putting 2 old Serwin Vega 15-inch subs in my Forerunner. I want to play slowed down bass Nectar songs on it.
Oh yeah, I like this.
What F3 should I shoot for? I have no idea what the cabin gain will be.
Well, it's going to be a lot in a Forerunner.
And should he go ported or should he go sealed?
With the Serwin Vega, I mean, what does he tell us which model? Oh, he says old Serwin Vegas. So those have the EBP ones vented on those. Those are going to be like more of a pro style driver. If he's thinking of something like a stroker, maybe.
Yeah, this is tough, Playback. I mean, yeah, you're probably using a driver that wants to be ported, like Cameron said, but you've got a vehicle, so you're going to get a lot of cabin gain, probably like 50, 60 hertz and down, and bass Nectar goes deep. I don't know if ported, like if those Serwin Vegas are actually going to port very low.
Yeah, that's the problem with the old Serwin Vegas is they were designed more to be sealed, as my understanding. Because if you ported, they didn't port low.
Yeah. The efficiency bandwidth product, they're better vented, but they just weren't designed to play very low in general. I think the one I've got, I'm actually looking at it. It's in my living room. It's a 15-inch stroker with the new model, very, very similar to the old model. I don't know how similar the TS parameters are, but the design, the aesthetics are very similar. So I assume they harkened that in the TS, but vented, I think I tuned it around 45 or 50 hertz or so. And there wasn't much below that I was just like, I'm not going to tune it much lower than that.
Yeah, this is one of those subwoofers, if I'm not mistaken, that they basically said, build this size box, which was a 3.5 cubic foot box, 4-inch by 14-inch port, and that's what you should do. And there were some of them that were really just not designed to really do anything else. So let's see.
Why? Yeah, I'm Googling around trying to find any information on them. The 154. Playback, do you already own these? Is that why you want to use them? I mean, for really low bass Nectar type stuff, they might not be the best option, but they actually, if I got them right here, they look like they have a rubber roll surround and stuff.
Okay. Yeah, that's something much different than what I'm talking about.
Yeah. There's a lot of varied information on these. You know what? I'd probably go ported. This is what I would do. I'd probably build a ported box and then stuff the port and try it sealed.
Yeah, you could do that.
If you don't mind the aesthetics of that, like I'm thinking in a home theater, I don't recommend that very often. I'll do it for testing, but in a car, if you're not too concerned about the aesthetics because you know it's going to be covered up in a trunk or something, and you can afford the space of a ported box, that would be maybe a good way to go. Build them ported, and then have a way to block off that port and try it both ways. If it was another driver, I'd definitely lean towards sealed.
I'm going to see if I can get enough of the TS parameters just to kind of get an idea as well for you, because I think this is a really good question. But while I'm working on that, let's go ahead and explain, why would you choose which box size? What box size would you choose and why?
Box size for the Sirwin Vegas?
I'm sorry, not box size, box
alignment.
Yeah. Go ahead, Cameron. What's your favorite box type?
I don't have one, if I'm being honest. I've done a little bit of everything. Like I said, I'm looking at this stroker, and I actually wish I'd just done it sealed, because I've been using DSP a lot lately, and I'm thinking about just stuffing this giant vent. I don't know. I mean, it depends on the application. I mean, I had an 18-inch Ultimax that was sealed, and that subwoofer can be ported or sealed. It works really well, and really it's good for just about any application. But I took it out of like a 12 cubic foot box and put it into like I forget what either 2 or 4 cubic feet sealed box. And I much preferred the sealed. That's 90% for music. For home theater, I might want the vented box back. I didn't use it for home theater at that point, so it's tough to compare those kind of things. But I mean, in terms of sound quality, my ears are so bad that I'm not the guy that's picking out like the group delay or the distortion in a subwoofer. So for those considerations, those aren't, I'm not convinced I can hear them. Maybe I can, and I'm not sure what to listen for, but yeah, I mean, I guess it I don't like to say absolutes, but that's why I just say it's tough. If I even, I don't think
I'm with you on that. I don't think it's audible, or at least not very audible.
Yeah.
Myself, I'm a sealed guy. I believe in that room game that I talked about earlier. So I like to build sealed mains, and then hand off the work to a subwoofer system below 80, 100 hertz. And I like to go sealed with that system too, because I like low frequencies over SPL. And I think with enough sealed drivers, you can get the SPL too. You can have the best of both worlds. But if I did want high SPL sound and I was severely budget limited, I would go ported on my subwoofers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I would never do passive radiator and horns. We can talk about that, but they have a lot of drawbacks.
I have no problem with passive radiators or horns. Well, I have no problem with passive radiators. Horns is another story. But first, let me talk about the minor differences that I think people are going to ask. One that people get caught up on is group delay. Whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, there are going to be differences in group delay. Sealed is going, out of the 3 that we're talking about right now, sealed is going to get you the best group delay. Ported would be the next best, but worse than obviously sealed. And then finally, last but not least, would be a passive radiator system would be the worst with group delay. Now, having said that, if you are using smaller drivers and want to go low, ported or passive radiator, I would use on anything that your box is just getting way too big. Most of the time, passive radiators add so much expense to it that it doesn't make a lot of sense to do. But if you want to get rid of this huge box and go smaller, that's when I would say go passive radiator. Like if your port is getting so long and problematic, or you're going to have crazy first port resonances, go passive radiator in that particular time. Sealed, obviously, if I'm going with a big subwoofer, I'm going sealed, right? Anything large, I'm going to go sealed. Anything 21, 24, maybe even 18, depending on where I'm at, what's going on, and what I have with it. One of my favorite subwoofers, I'm actually going to have a video out, I think probably tomorrow or the next day, which is going to be on the Ultimax 18. One of the subwoofers that can probably do anything. Infinite baffle, sealed, ported, does it really well no matter how you want to do it. I would say that if you're first getting in DIY, start with sealed. Just start with sealed. you can make. Someone asked me this. Can you make too large of a sealed box? Ryan, what do you think? Or Cameron? Actually, we'll go with Cameron. I ask Ryan all the time.
It depends
Cameron,
on what
do you think?
your power handling requirements are going to be. I mean, if you're going to DSP the thing, down at the low end, you don't want a giant box where it's just totally unloaded. So, I mean, yeah, it's going to depend on the application, I suppose.
Yeah, you're not wrong, Cameron. If you want to keep your power in check, I would take the extra time to keep my power in check with measurements and due diligence and everything else. So I would say no, because the bigger the box, it's just free efficiency. But if you're going sealed, one of the benefits is you don't have to have as large a box as a ported system. So, I mean, take that as, a benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of the problem with going too large of a box with sealed is that you start losing control of the woofer after a period of time. So once you get too large of a box, it basically becomes an infinite baffle. And the problem that I think why Ryan doesn't like that is because if you try to get too much power to it and try to get low, well, it's going to be power limited, because after a while you're going to start losing control of the woofer. So you have to limit
No,
that
I'm
power
saying I
where
like
you're
that.
going.
I like infinite baffle, because you can just set that power limit, right? Like, you know your excursion capabilities of your subwoofer, assuming you're doing your homework. You know how much excursion you're getting at certain frequencies and certain power. And if you have an infinite baffle or very large box, it's free efficiency, because you can just, like, if you have a very small sealed box or an infinite baffle, you can get away with sometimes half the power in an infinite baffle.
Yeah. And then I actually don't mind infinite baffle. This is one of the reasons why I love the Ultimax series so much, is because it's so versatile. It allows you to do really anything you want and try out anything you want. It's one of those ones that I'm just like, look, if you don't know what you want to do, go with that. You can build 3 or 4 different boxes and then just decide which one you like the best at the end of the day. But if you're a beginner, ported, there's a couple things to keep in mind while doing a ported box. One, you want to make sure to keep your port air velocity as low as you can. Typically, we say 17 meters a second, although some people will say up to 32 if you flare both ends. That's completely up to you on what you're gonna do on that regards. But then on top of that, the other thing is first port resonance. Typically, you want your first port resonance to be double wherever you're going to cross over. So if you're crossing over at 80 hertz, first port resonance is where you typically like to go to at least 160 hertz if you can. Sometimes when you're going with those larger subwoofers and tuning lower, I see first port tune resonance as low as 80 hertz. And that means that when it's playing 80 hertz, you're going to hear that first port resonance as well.
Can we just jump back to Playback Mansion, who is also named Ryan? He has posted the TS parameters. That is actually a pretty killer looking sub, just at first glance.
No, he does have QES and QMS now. Okay, because I couldn't find QES or QMS. I was like, man, I cannot find.
Yeah, that's pretty
killer.
So
let's go ahead.
You're gonna have a lot of cabin gain. I'd be leaning towards sealed myself. If you want those really low frequencies, I'm assuming bass nectar still means what it means that it did in 2000, 2001 when I was cranking those kind of tunes, which is pretty low frequencies if I remember right. So yeah, I'd run sealed myself.
Well, let's go ahead and I'm going to throw it in WinISD real quick. The VAS, what was that? 181.2 liters.
The other thing with car audio is, I mean, power delivery is rarely your problem. Car audio amplifiers are massively powerful. So if you can get some DSP on it sealed, even without DSP, like they're saying, your cabin gain is going to make up for a lot of that low end. If I'm not mistaken, is it a generalized rule that you're tuning higher in car audio with vented enclosures because you're getting so much cabin gain? Aren't there competitions, aren't they tuning around like 40 or 50?
Yeah, I believe they are.
Well, they're tuning it in the 30s and 40s, but it's not so much for the cabin gain. It's because of where they're testing
where they're trying to
particular frequency.
Yeah, they're trying to, if they're going after SPL, which I assume Ryan is not.
No,
he might be, and if he is, he should go ported. But if they're going for SPL, then the idea is to match your impedance spike and your port tuning as best as you can to the frequencies that you're trying to hit at high SPLs. So if you're trying to get really high SPL at say 60 hertz, you can set your tune to like 50. I'm just using random numbers. That'll put an impedance peak at like 60, 70, which is going to vastly reduce the amount of output requirements from your amplifier in terms of current. And your excursion is going to be dropping because your port tuning is so close. So you can just crank on that thing. You're going to need very little amplifier output, and there will be very little excursion. Now, so you basically run into thermal limits. You can go as loud as you want, as long as you don't melt the thing, basically.
Yeah.
That's my understanding of it without being a car guy
Well,
since 25 years ago.
So let's talk a little bit about the actual WinISD thoughts on this, which will be very interesting. So when I put your data in, what I found out, first of all, is they recommended the exact sealed box that they recommended, which is around 3.5 cubic feet with a 4-inch vent and about 15 inches. So if you want to do that, you can. The F3 will be on that particular sub will be around 27 hertz, which is pretty darn good, and its tuning frequency is 25. So you're getting right there in the 20 hertz. If you want to go below that, you're gonna need to go sealed in DSP. Sealed is actually surprising to me. The sealed is F3 of 48 hertz, so it's pretty high up there.
And a car, that's fine though. This is a killer sub for a car, actually.
Yeah, I think it would be a great subwoofer. So
He says, "I want to scare my girlfriend."
I would build the.
How much do you want to scare her?
How much? This is what I would do. I would build the 3.5 cubic foot with the port. Okay, it's pretty easy to do. All right, and test it. Well, it is big actually, and test it if you want to. Now, if you want to go sealed, they recommend around 2 cubic feet, 2.2 to be exact. So still big, but it's a 15-inch subwoofer too. So, two of them double that, 4.4.
Yeah.
So I would probably go sealed myself. All right, we got another super chat. This is a great question. Would you build Scott Hinson's multi-entry horn or use the same drivers to build a typical MTM design that you can just drop that can just drop into my current LCR position? Great to see you, Ryan.
Are you guys aware of the multiple entry horn?
Oh, that's not what these are called. There's a different name for this.
Synergy horn is, I think, what they're called. Yeah, Scott Henson has his. Yeah, Scott Henson has his own. He's published a lot about his.
He's got the MEH design.
Oh,
yeah,
that's new to me. I'm sorry. I've been sleeping for the past 5 years.
Yes, I guess what he's asking is build a multiple entry version or use those same drivers to build an MTM.
So let's show you some pictures of. This is someone else's
design, right?
Well, this is someone else that built one of the MEH ones.
I've always heard them called synergy
just
horns,
share the screen,
which are an amazing concept and design, but I've never heard.
I'm not going to do that actually.
I haven't heard any in person. I've seen a ton about them online. I've never heard one.
Bill Waslow.
I would tell you this.
No, go ahead.
Oh, good. Not do it. No, I'm not doing it.
I was very tight with Bill Waslow there for a while, and when he built his synergy horn, and he went through a whole design and built just an incredible system, and I really trust his opinion.
He's the designer of OmniMic, right?
Yeah, he was. I don't know if he did number.
Yeah, he
still is. Okay.
No, he still is.
Incredible guy. Yeah. Like really knows his stuff, and he taught me a lot actually. Anyways, he built some synergy horns, and he said the sound out of those was unlike anything he ever heard in a very positive way. And I believe it. The concept on paper is very intriguing, very good, and incredible. If you're game to build synergy horns or these multi-entry horns, and Scott Hinson's design is proven, I would lean towards that. I mean, yeah.
Scott Henson knows what he's doing. If it was me, I would do Scott's design. absolutely would do Scott's design and stick with that. It's a really cool looking speaker when it's done too. I mean, it's beautiful looking. So I would do that. I think there's this problem in audio recently. I've created a couple TMMs, and people are like, "Why a TMM? Why not an MTM?" And and other designs. And I think we've gotten to this point where people have gotten to this belief that this MTM is just far superior design than anything else. And so when it's not an MTM, then we get that point of, well, maybe it wasn't designed right, or why would you choose something other than MTM if you know that it's far superior? And that's just not always the case for every design. And there's design goals, and we've talked a lot on our specific channels on how every design is going to be a matter of choices, and those choices are going to affect it. But they're literally just choices you have to make, whether it's for design reasons or other reasons. But they're not necessarily right or wrong choices. They're just ones that you decide on.
Yeah, very
Trade-offs.
likely the trade-off in this case is build complexity. So if
Yep.
you're up for it, then
Yeah.
you're probably not sacrificing much else.
Yeah, that was going to be my. By the way, thank you, Thustad, for
Yeah.
if I'm pronouncing that correctly, for the super chat. But yeah, that like Ryan just
Absolutely.
said, they're extremely detailed builds, a lot of angles, a lot of routing work. So if that's not a problem for you, I would definitely build Scott's if you already have the drivers.
Yeah, I would do Scott's. Bennett Prescott said the same thing. For those of you who are not familiar with Bennett Prescott is the guy over at BNC. So if you're familiar with BNC speakers, that's Bennett Prescott. Not really a designer, more into sales end of it, but awesome guy. He's been on my channel a few times. Love him. And if he said do the same thing,
Yeah,
look,
there's
he's heard a
4
lot of
for 4.
speakers.
Build Scott's.
Trust him.
Unless you
Build
really want
Scott.
to try your own thing or something, or there's another design that intrigues you, you're a little nervous about construction of this thing. But if you're good with woodworking, you feel confident you could build Scott's, and you have no interest in trying to
Build it.
reinvent the wheel, then build Scott's. You probably will not be disappointed.
And they will come.
They will.
All right, here's a good question.
That is a good question.
I heard that ported subs have gotten much better in comparison to sealed subs' tightness, etc., like sound quality. That's what I think he's talking about. What are the things that evolved ported subs so much in the last decade?
Ooh, me.
Go for it. I'm thinking this is driver development stuff. This is kind of probably over my head. Go for it.
Well, there's probably a few things. The drivers have probably improved. Neodymium magnets and stuff like that have really improved motor strength and allowed us to do things with drivers like go bigger, go lower, and things like that. You didn't see very effective 21-inch subwoofers 20 years ago. I think the big thing is we've chased lower and lower tunings. So now you see, I mean, a home theater sub tuned to 20 hertz is not unheard of, and or very
lower.
much lower, yeah. And so all the nasty sounds you get with ports, like chuffing and things like that, have gotten lower and lower in frequency, where we're not as picky. And that's not to say we've just buried the problems with ported down deeper. The most important thing I think we've done over the last 10, 20 years is we've gotten better at designing subwoofers. So the average Joe now is picking up WinISD or whatever, which I think kind of hit mainstream maybe 15 years ago. And I mean, you just download it to your computer, pop all the stuff in, and anybody, it's free.
It's
you
free.
Can start getting these things. And I know when I first started out on this, I'm not kidding, guys. I walked into a car audio store. I snuck a little tape measure in there and measured a port and a box, and then went home and built it. And then put whatever subwoofer. This is how bad I was. This is, I was a teenager, and I put a subwoofer in it, and then fired it up, and it was probably boomy and crappy and chuffy and everything else. And so it'd be very easy for an impressionable person 20, 25 years ago to then try sealed and go, oh, sealed sounds way tighter. Yeah.
So much better. Yeah. And it did.
Yeah,
it probably did.
most of the time.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, keep in mind too, like a lot of the car audio subs, which we already talked about, are tuned in like the 30 hertz, somewhere in the 30, 35 hertz or higher. And so when you're playing stuff below that, you lose control of your subwoofer fast. And so now all of a sudden you're like, wow, this sounds terrible. This looks terrible. But part of it is what you're playing and where you're tuned to, etc. But I believe that the biggest thing that has changed, that has made, is understanding how to design a ported sub properly. When you understand how to design a ported sub properly, it can make all the difference in the world and what the final product sounds like. Now, one thing I would strongly suggest anyone that wants to build a ported subwoofer is not to be afraid to make mistakes, because you will probably build a ported subwoofer at some point in time that you'll find out doesn't sound that good, and that's okay. You can figure out what you did wrong. And sometimes it's just the driver you've used. Sometimes, unfortunately, drivers are not all made the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are better and worse drivers, but I think in this day and age with the technology and just like you can get on the internet and get the answers. I mean, if you're willing to put in the time, almost every time, the first time you build a subwoofer, it's going to sound pretty good these days. I mean, even drivers, it's so easy nowadays to weed out the good ones and the bad ones. I just picked the cool looking one off the shelf at the local car audio place, right? And I didn't know what a TS
Yeah.
parameter was, because I mean, we're talking about the 90s or whatever it was. And like I say, sneakily measuring things when the salesman isn't looking or whatever. I mean, it was so bad. So that's the perspective. And now we're dealing with not only better drivers, so there is the technology part, but just much better execution, much better.
Yes, and I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
So, real quick, the biggest bummer about Scott's design is it uses a $750 HyperX plate amplifier with DSP per speaker. One question I would be curious about, well, a couple questions. One, does it need all the power? And two, could you get away with like a mini DSP and use your own amplifiers? Or something like the Acoustos, if you don't need that much power. Maybe the Acoustos could work. I mean, it depends on what you need. If you need FIR filtering, IIR filtering, or if it's just crossover points or what. If you have, I would look into those options, because $750 HyperX plate amplifier, that's $1,500 before you're even talking drivers. That can hurt. But I would assume that even a mini DSP should be able to work, not knowing exactly what he's got.
Yeah, I agree.
Done with the
I don't
DSP
know
side.
if Scott has a reason to require the Hypex amps or anything, and the Hypex amps are very good. But generally a horn design, which Synergy horn is, with BNC drivers, did he say? That should be a very efficient speaker. Yeah, I
Pretty
mean,
efficient.
I'm betting you barely break 1 watt ever.
Which is why I'm thinking even the Acoustos. The problem with the Acoustos, that's like $700 for 6 channels output. So you shouldn't need more than 4, I would imagine, in this particular case. Is that right now it doesn't have FIR filtering or IR filtering. So if he's doing any of those types of things, then you would need to go with something like the mini DSP. And I just don't know what his DSP looks like on that particular one. But I can't imagine it would. You would want to talk to Scott about that. Now, Scott is, if you're on Facebook, Scott is really, he's good at answering those types of questions. I think you could probably message him and he would answer that for you for sure.
What else?
Well, should we try to get back to the topic?
What are we talking about?
So I want to know why you don't like passive
They
radiators.
cost money. It's just stupid. Sorry.
Well, not always. It's not always stupid. It depends on why, right? Like what size. Like, I mean, if you can build, for example, I think you can do like an 18-inch tuned very similar to like the 18 Ultimax, and something like a 4 or 5 cubic foot box with passive radiators costs more money versus doing like a 12 cubic foot box.
Yeah. I know there's an advantage. There definitely is, but I never see it being a good trade-off. Every time I've looked into it, I'm just, I'll go this direction. It never makes sense to me.
That's where I'm
Personally.
at.
Yeah.
Price. I'm cutting a few extra holes. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're on a lot of.
You know
Go
what I
ahead.
want to?
I was gonna say they're on a lot of studio
No,
monitors.
do it.
Go for
it. That's all I had to say.
So here's what I would like to say about this. If you're going to be going studio, if you're going to be going on your pro audio stage, I think that's the only time really a horn subwoofer is typically going to be used by most people. I don't think most people are going to be using a horn subwoofer in their house.
I've seen it a lot. I visited a guy in Minnesota a couple times. I think his name was Luke. He was pretty active on AVS Forum 5-6 years ago, and he had, I think, 4 horn-loaded 21-inch subwoofers. I mean, I personally experienced over 140 dB in his room. It was wild.
Because that's the whole point of going a horn subwoofer, right? Efficiency.
It was wild and low. They could get low too. They were pretty impressive. Horn subwoofers definitely have their place. They have a lot of complexity. They have a limited bandwidth, but they have a huge upside of SPL.
And some of that also depends on the size of it, because the size of the horn also determines how low you can go, etc. So, it's out of all the ones, it's the biggest box out of all of them. So out of all of them, it's technically, if you're doing a true full horn, it's going to be the biggest box. Now, I was going to bring this up. Bill Futzmorris. I don't, you know what? I'm going to say his name wrong. Yeah, we'll go Futzmorris. He does have a couple designs on his website. If you're really interested in building one, there you go. He gives you all the information on it. I think it's $20 for the plans, and then he tells you what it should be capable of. He's got a couple different ones for home theater. He's got some for, your pro audio scene. So if you're really interested in that, you can check his site out. There might be some other sites as well that you guys know of, but that's the one that I know of mostly.
Yeah.
I see people build them under their beds quite often.
Yeah, or under your seats.
Frame. Yeah.
You could put your first row if seating. If you have a big theater, horn makes a lot of sense.
That's a good point. Yeah, you could build it inside your
platform, right?
Yeah.
You could have your first row seating on the actual slab or floor or whatever, and then your second row seating can sit on the horn, and your whole riser can be a horn, and then you can have another horn at the front that rises your front speakers and stuff. I've seen people do crazy things with horns, and even though they're huge, they actually disappear in the room, and you get just amazing bass out of them.
Amazing bass, how can it be? So check this out. Toys Hi-Fi, he's talking about the Epic Hi-Fis use passive radiators, and they don't. And I'm going to tell you why they use passive radiators, because it's exactly what we're talking about. If you use the Epic Hi-Fis are capable of a lot of bass output. They really are. For that size speaker, it's crazy, right? The problem with that type of speaker, and whenever you get this little driver that can produce a lot of bass, is that you can have issues with port noise, right? Unless you create a really long, big port and a big box. And the whole point of the Epic Hi-Fis was to create a smaller, kind of bookshelf mini tower type design that you can put pretty much anywhere, and it would sound great. And in that particular case, the passive radiator made perfect sense for it. It was yep, passive radiator on either side. It's perfect. And I would never change that. I would never go to a port on that particular design. Just wouldn't do it. That is the right design for that particular speaker. And some people ask me, why did I not use the Epic passive radiator on that? Because it would match the sides. I'm going to just tell you, if you guys ever model the Epic passive radiator, you'll find out that the Epic passive radiator actually does not model like a typical passive radiator. And there's reasons behind that I don't know if I can go into. But it doesn't model like a normal passive radiator, and because of that, it will not act like a normal passive radiator when you put it in a speaker. Now you can use DSP to fix that if you want to, but I didn't want to create a speaker that you had to DSP the low end to get what you wanted out of it. So I'm saying this as kind of one of these, you can use that passive radiator if you know what you're doing and looking at it, but make sure you know what you're doing and looking at it before you use it, because I think for a lot of people that's not going to do what they think it's going to do.
I want to quickly shout. I'm sorry, there's so many chats we haven't gotten to, but I just see this one.
We're not going to, because we're already at an hour. So go ahead.
If you want, hit one, go ahead. The
ahead.
Chicago Horn Loudspeaker guys commented. They've got their own YouTube channel. I don't know if it's a singular person that runs it, but there's a few guys that get together and talk about horns. They're really cool guys. It's really laid back. Check them out if you're interested in horns. They're really cool. It's really cool to see them comment.
Right here. I like vented boxes because these woofers that I think do the best mid-range intended vented boxes. I'm going to check them out tonight. I have not actually run across them, but I'm definitely going to check them out tonight. That'd be great.
Yeah, and you know what? Just looking at the profile picture on that, I'm wondering if they're like, okay, what I want to say is, if I was running just a stereo system without a dedicated subwoofer system, I would lean heavily towards vented systems. Vented boxes would be the way to go for sure, especially like in a two-way without subwoofer support. If you go sealed, you're going to sacrifice a lot of bass.
Yeah, completely agree. And I would say the exact same thing. He did say he bought his entire Fitzmaurice's entire build collection. He said not the most clear directions, but very good stuff. So good to know that there are people. And someone else said, Snoopy Boobs said, AVS Forum has a ton of proven bass horn plans for free. So you can also check out AVS Forum if that's the way you go. We're not really the most none of us have designed. I don't think any of us have designed a.
I've never built
any
one.
That type of horn subwoofer. You've designed one, but you haven't built one?
In horn resp and stuff like that. But there's a guy on AVS Forum named LTD02. I don't know if he's still active on there. Again, I've been sleeping for 5 years. He's done a lot of horn resp.
So just so we know, O is not O. It's 02.
Okay, 02.
LTD 02 is. I'm 90% right. Positive.
Uppercase L, lowercase T, D, and then either uppercase O or 02. So it's probably a 0. And he's done a lot of modeling for people, and he just chucks designs out there. They're not necessarily proven, like they haven't been built, but he knows his horn stuff. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, that has been the entire hour. That went by fast. First of all, thank everyone for the super chats. That was amazing. We really appreciate that. If you did not get your question answered this time, I'm not telling you to super chat, but that is one we will obviously answer if you do that. But so thanks so much for everyone that was able to do that. Before we go, we always ask, what do you guys have coming up on your channels? And is there anything you want to say or anything you want to hit that we didn't get to?
I've got a big high efficiency passive vented two-way coming out very soon. I'm in the works on that. And then sometime this week, I've got a follow-up video where I show you the crossover design of the latest speaker that I built using the Acoustis DSP amplifier. So I'm really excited about that. These things sound so good. I have this terrible, maybe they're watching. I have this terrible Serwin Vega subwoofer that I built, DSP'd. It sounds so good. I'm able to get a really good response out of it in this room, thanks to the DSP and that alone. So yeah, look for that.
Myself, I should be getting to a subwoofer build soon. I'm still trying to put my life together down here after the move.
And I'm sending him the subwoofer, and I haven't sent
it to him
yet,
I mean, so. I gotta figure out. I gotta buy some tools and do some stuff anyway, so it's not a big thing. But I might start posting a little bit on my channel if anybody follows about the room that I'm going to be working with, and some plans, and then eventually the first thing I'm going to do is a subwoofer, and it's going to be sealed.
And that's the reason why I'm sending him that subwoofer. I'm going to be sending him an 18-inch Ultimax 2. If you guys are very interested in the 18-inch Ultimax 2, I am going to go over why it's different from the Ultimax 1, and there are changes to it. There are some changes that you might consider for the better or for the worse. So I'm going to explain that to you, what the differences are. That's going to be in a video coming up. And I think a lot of times people don't understand the technology that goes into subwoofers. So we talk a lot about what they did, even some of the stuff that you can't see, and why that impacts the actual final output of the sound, why that inputs the sensitivity, why it inputs the wattage output. Like, why can this one do more wattage than the old Ultimax? And it's pretty smart with some of the decisions and engineering decisions that they did on that. Now, having said that, there is one last question that I would like us to answer to, but that's the first one I'm going out. I also have a video coming out on the Valencia home theater seat. It actually has heating and cooling on. It's really cool. It's really nice. So you guys like it, but I'm not going to say it's perfect, because there's some things I may not like as much as other things. So definitely check that out, especially if you're in the market for home theater seating. I think they're pretty neat. Last question I do think we should hit, because I think this is a question that a lot of people have. Thoughts on mixing ported and sealed subs in the same room, in the same environment? Should you, shouldn't you? Why not?
I have no problem with a ported speaker with a high pass on it into a sealed sub, or vice versa.
But he's talking about, like,
if you have a ported sub and a sealed sub doing
subs.
the same bandwidth, I'm not a fan. Technically, it's not a problem. Technically, I wouldn't do it. Like, why?
I wouldn't do it either. You got different group delays going on, right? So we have different group delays going on with the sealed sub. We got different group delays going on with the ported sub. There's a lot of things that you're going to have to figure out and work out that just doesn't make sense. I mean, just take all sealed or all ported. And I'm more of a fan that likes to really keep all my subs the same. I know not everyone does that. Some people will put up close subs in, like, their home theater seating, like right on the back of their seats, things of that nature. You can do that. If I was going to do that, though, I would probably just bypass that and go to bass shakers. Yeah. Like, if that's really what I'm concerned with, is getting that impact, I'm just going to go bass shakers and get, the sound from my main subwoofers. Which, by the way, bass shakers, when designed and used properly, are really good.
About that, but yeah, that's a good thing.
Someone brought that up in the beginning.
Yeah, actually, I know and I cut you off, and I'm sorry, but I will say this before we go. I will say this. I did a video like years ago on bass shakers, and I had my nieces and nephews come and my kids come over, and I showed them a scene to a movie they'd never seen. It was the old King Kong with Jack Black in it, if you guys remember that one. But there's a scene where the girl, I can't remember her name, was trying to run away from King Kong, and he slams his fist out, bam! And I had the bass shakers on. They had no idea I had bass shakers on. They had no idea. They just wanted to listen. And those things hit so hard, they screamed and jumped out of the couch. They're like, ah! And it was just really cool thing. Now with 21s, I don't need those anymore. I don't use them at all. But they can be really fun.
Children, Snoopy Boob says, okay.
Whatever you think. I think they're great for, especially if you have neighbors or if you're in an apartment. I think they're really good. Or a racing simulator.
All right.
All right. Anything else? Otherwise, we're out.
All right. See you guys.
We're out. See you next